Balmoral Castle has always been painted as the Queen's beloved escape, a place of peace, tradition, and breathtaking beauty in the Scottish Highlands. To the outside world, it seemed like paradise, a royal retreat untouched by time. But behind the castle's grandeur and charm lies a much darker reality, one that many former staff members are only now beginning to share. For decades, Balmoral has relied on an army of maids, butlers, and attendants to maintain its image of elegance and perfection. These workers were meant to be invisible, ensuring that the royal family lived in uninterrupted luxury. Yet, in recent years, whispers have surfaced about why so many maids chose to leave the castle, often abruptly, and sometimes in tears. The reasons aren't what you'd expect. They aren't simple stories of long hours or the isolation of working in a remote Scottish estate. What these women endured behind closed doors reveals shocking truths about the pressures, demands, and at times, humiliations of serving inside one of the most famous royal residences in the world. As more insiders step forward, a startling picture emerges, one that suggests life inside Balmoral Castle was far less idyllic than the royal family would want us to believe. And the real reasons these maids walked away will truly blow your mind. On the surface, Balmoral Castle is often described as a fairy tale retreat. Nestled deep within the Scottish Highlands, it is where the royal family retreats each summer, far from the glare of London and the rigid formalities of Buckingham Palace. To tourists, it is a symbol of serenity, tradition, and timeless grandeur. But for the maids who worked within its granite walls, life was anything but idyllic. From the moment a maid arrived at Balmoral, the rules were made crystal clear. Everything in the castle operated on strict schedules. Staff were expected to rise early, often before dawn, and begin preparing rooms, setting fires, polishing silver, and pressing uniforms. Their role was to create a seamless environment where the royals would never glimpse the effort it took to maintain their comfort. The castle's size alone was daunting. With nearly 50 bedrooms, sprawling dining halls, and countless corridors, the upkeep demanded relentless effort. Maids worked long shifts, often 12 to 14 hours a day, with little recognition. And unlike most employers, the royal family's expectations left no room for error. A wrinkle in a curtain, a spot of dust on a polished floor, or even the sound of footsteps in the wrong place could trigger reprimands from superiors. Privacy was non-existent. The staff lived in quarters on the estate, often sharing cramped dormitory-style rooms with little separation between work and personal life. Even in their free time, maids remained under strict observation. One former maid once revealed that, "You never stopped working. You were always on duty, even when you thought you were off." The most striking expectation, however, was invisibility. Maids were trained to move silently through hallways, stepping aside instantly if a royal approached. They were not to speak unless spoken to, and certainly not to share opinions. The motto was clear: be present, but never be seen. For many, this meant erasing their personalities the moment they put on the uniform. And then there were the traditions unique to Balmoral. Unlike Buckingham Palace, where everything followed rigid protocol, Balmoral was known for its informal royal summers. But informal didn't mean easy, it meant constant unpredictability. Royals expected activities like picnics, hunting trips, and long hikes to be prepared at a moment's notice. Maids would spend hours packing elaborate lunches, cleaning muddy boots, and ensuring every outdoor excursion felt effortless. Though behind the scenes it was anything but. While some maids initially found the experience thrilling, after all, working for the royal family seemed like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The reality often set in quickly. The job came with prestige but little reward. Salaries were modest and advancement opportunities limited. Most maids discovered that the glamour outsiders imagined rarely matched the exhaustion they experienced day after day. What made it more difficult was the isolation. Balmoral is miles from any major city, and the remoteness left many staff feeling trapped. Social lives were nearly impossible to maintain, especially with the heavy workload. Some likened the atmosphere to living in a gilded prison, surrounded by beauty, yet cut off from freedom. Still, the royal family's presence at Balmoral gave the estate a sense of importance. Many maids held on, at least for a time, out of loyalty or the hope that the prestige of working for the monarchy would open doors later in life. But as the years went by, cracks began to show. The glamour faded, and the hardships became impossible to ignore. And soon, stories began to emerge, not just of exhaustion, but of deeper struggles that went far beyond long hours or isolation. What was happening behind those stone walls pushed more and more maids to walk away from the castle for good. Balmoral Castle has long been portrayed as the jewel of the British monarchy's private residences, nestled deep in the Scottish Highlands. The sprawling estate, with its rolling hills, hunting grounds, and lush gardens, is often painted as a tranquil paradise where the royal family escapes from public life. To the outside world, it seems like a dream location, a place of elegance, tradition, and timeless beauty. But for those who worked within its walls, especially the maids, the truth was often far less enchanting. The daily life of a Balmoral maid was grueling, dictated by a strict routine that left no room for error. Each morning began before dawn, with staff quietly moving through the castle's vast corridors to prepare fireplaces, polish silver, and ensure that every corner of the royal apartments shone. Even the smallest task was done with meticulous attention, for a single oversight could lead to sharp criticism from higher-ranking staff or, in some cases, the royals themselves. The castle may have looked peaceful on the outside, but inside it buzzed with constant, silent labor. Maids were expected to blend seamlessly into the background, working almost invisibly so as not to disrupt the royal family's experience. They laid out clothes, made beds to exact standards, served meals, and cleaned rooms endlessly. A curtain left slightly uneven, a glass set at the wrong angle, or even a smudge on polished wood could be considered a failure. The pressure was immense, not only because the staff were serving the monarchy, but also because of the rigid hierarchy of castle employment. Senior staff held authority, and for the maids, it often meant enduring long hours with little recognition or appreciation, though the job carried prestige. After all, not everyone could say they worked for the royal family. The isolation of Balmoral quickly weighed on many employees. The castle's location, while breathtaking, was far removed from the bustling cities and social lives they once knew. Staff often stayed on the estate for months at a time, rarely leaving the grounds. For younger maids, especially those in their late teens and early 20s, the experience could feel stifling. Instead of glamour, they found themselves in a cycle of demanding work and lonely evenings, far away from family and friends. What made matters more difficult was the unspoken rule of silence. Staff were expected never to discuss what they saw or heard inside the castle. Conversations among the royal family, personal quirks, or even minor disagreements were considered strictly off-limits. This culture of secrecy added another layer of pressure to their lives. While guests from around the world might marvel at Balmoral's beauty, the maids lived in a world where mistakes, exhaustion, and silence defined their days. Former staff members have quietly revealed that despite the royal family's fondness for Balmoral, working there was far from idyllic. Long days stretched into late nights, especially during the summer months when the family entertained visitors and held events. At times it felt less like employment and more like servitude, where loyalty was rewarded with little more than the chance to serve another season. For many of the maids, the breaking point came when the personal cost outweighed the prestige. While it was an honor to work in such a historic castle, the relentless demands and emotional toll left some with no choice but to leave. Beneath the glamour and tradition, Balmoral's walls held the untold struggles of those who kept it running, a reality that most people outside the castle could never imagine. For many, the idea of working inside Balmoral Castle seemed like stepping into history itself. The chance to serve the royal family carried an almost mythical prestige, a badge of honor few could ever claim. But as the maids quickly discovered, the weight of this honor came with a heavy price. Behind the grandeur of royal life, they endured struggles few outsiders could ever imagine, struggles that were rarely spoken about publicly. One of the most pressing challenges was the sheer physical toll of the work. Balmoral's size, with its countless rooms, sweeping staircases, and expansive corridors, meant that the staff were constantly on their feet. A single shift could involve running up and down dozens of flights of stairs, carrying heavy linens, or rushing to prepare entire suites before the royals or their guests returned. Breaks were few and far between, and the demand for perfection meant that even after hours of labor, a maid might be told to redo a task if it wasn't considered flawless. Beyond the physical strain, there was the emotional burden of invisibility. Maids were expected to move silently, to blend into the background as though they were part of the castle itself. They could not interrupt, offer opinions, or display signs of exhaustion. This constant suppression of self created an environment where many felt like ghosts, present in every moment of royal life, yet entirely unseen. For young women who had once dreamed of adventure or opportunity, the reality of becoming an invisible servant behind closed doors was crushing. The isolation of Balmoral's location added to these struggles. With the castle situated deep in the Scottish Highlands, far from cities or even small towns, the staff often went weeks without leaving the estate. Social lives dwindled, friendships outside the castle faded, and family visits became rare luxuries. For some, this sense of being cut off from the world outside created feelings of loneliness and even despair. Staff quarters, though adequate, were far from luxurious, and many spent evenings alone, exhausted, with little more than the knowledge that another long day awaited them. There were also the strict unspoken rules that governed every aspect of service. Confidentiality wasn't just encouraged, it was demanded. Maids often witnessed the most private aspects of royal life, from personal conversations to intimate family moments. Yet they knew that speaking even a word of what they saw could result in immediate dismissal and the end of their careers. This pressure to remain silent weighed heavily, creating an atmosphere of constant vigilance. One slip of the tongue could end everything, and then there was the hierarchy. At Balmoral, like in most royal households, staff were arranged in a strict order. Senior housekeepers held authority, and maids at the bottom of the chain often bore the brunt of discipline. Some accounts suggest that the environment could be harsh, with reprimands delivered swiftly and, at times, humiliatingly. While loyalty and hard work could sometimes lead to advancement, many maids found themselves stuck in the same demanding roles, year after year, with little recognition. Despite all of this, there were moments that reminded the staff why Balmoral held such a mystique. A kind word from a royal, a breathtaking view of the Highlands during a rare quiet moment, or the knowledge that they were part of living history offered fleeting glimpses of pride. But these small rewards were often overshadowed by exhaustion, pressure, and an unshakable sense of being undervalued. In the end, the silent struggles of service at Balmoral revealed a truth the public rarely saw. Behind the fairy tale image of the royal retreat lay a reality marked by sacrifice, loneliness, and invisible hardship. And for many of the maids who walked those stone halls, the cost was simply too high to bear. The world has always viewed Balmoral Castle as a symbol of tradition, privilege, and royal splendor. But for those who served behind its walls, the glittering image often masked a far more difficult reality. Over time, the strain became too heavy, and many of the maids made the painful decision to walk away from what outsiders assumed was the opportunity of a lifetime. At the heart of their departure was exhaustion. The relentless pace of life inside the castle left little room for rest or recovery. Maids rose before dawn to prepare the fireplaces, polish the furniture, and ready the rooms before the royal family awoke. They worked late into the night, especially during the summer season when Balmoral hosted an endless stream of guests. The physical labor was draining enough, but when paired with the emotional weight of perfectionism, it became unsustainable. For many, the choice was stark. Continue sacrificing their health and happiness or leave the grandeur of Balmoral behind. Another factor was the absence of personal freedom. Maids weren't simply employees. They were part of a system that demanded total control over their time and behavior. They lived on the grounds, followed strict schedules, and adhered to a code of silence that isolated them from the outside world. Even when they weren't working, they were never truly free. For younger staff especially, this confinement felt suffocating. The castle that was supposed to represent beauty and history began to feel more like a gilded cage. Then came the issue of recognition, or rather, the lack of it. Despite dedicating countless hours to their roles, many maids felt invisible. Their work ensured that Balmoral shone in the eyes of its royal occupants and visitors, yet they themselves remained in the shadows. A job that should have been filled with pride often left them with a gnawing sense of being undervalued. Even when moments of kindness or gratitude surfaced, they were fleeting, unable to balance out the constant pressure and lack of appreciation. There were also the personal sacrifices. Some left behind families, partners, and children to live and work at Balmoral for months at a time. Others gave up opportunities for education or different careers, lured by the prestige of royal service, only to find themselves caught in a cycle of long hours and limited growth. The realization that the job offered little in the way of advancement, and even less in terms of personal fulfillment, pushed many to reevaluate their futures. Over time, stories began to circulate quietly among former staff, painting a picture that was very different from the one seen by the public. They spoke of moments of kindness, but also of strict discipline, loneliness, and exhaustion. These stories, though rarely shared openly due to confidentiality agreements and loyalty to the crown, revealed the truth. Working at Balmoral came at a cost too great for many to endure. For those who chose to leave, the decision was bittersweet. Walking away meant giving up the prestige of saying they had worked for the royal family, but it also meant reclaiming their independence and peace of mind. Many went on to build new lives, free from the weight of the castle's expectations, while carrying with them the memories, both good and bad, of their time in one of the world's most famous residences. And so, the real reason so many maids left Balmoral Castle wasn't scandal or disloyalty. It was something far more human. It was the recognition that no amount of royal glamour could outweigh the need for rest, freedom, and dignity. Behind the fairy tale facade of Balmoral, these women made a choice that spoke louder than the silence they had lived with for so long. They chose themselves.